Today is Wednesday, Chav Zayin Tevis Tavshin Ayin Gimel. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim Tavshin Yud Aleph Tavshin Yud Beis, in the middle of the Mamar Vayedaber, etc. Zos Chukas Hatorah of Shabbos Parshas Shmini, Parshas Porah of Tavshin Yud Aleph. We are on page Nun Beis, chapter 4, Ois Daled. We are in the process of discussing the concept of Rotzu V'Shoiv, leaving and returning, as a concept to explain the mitzvah of Parah Aduma, the red heifer. And the Rebbe explained that in all of creation we find this idea of Rotzu V'Shoiv, this phenomenon of leaving and returning. And the reason for that is because the life force, the godly energy that gives life to all of creation, is in a constant mode of leaving and returning. The reason for this phenomenon of leaving and returning is because of two things. Number one, because of the source from where the life force comes. And number two, because of where the life force ends up. When the life force, the life-giving energy, godly life-giving energy, feels its source and cleaves to its source, it has a feeling when it's out of its source, when it goes down, it descends to give life to something that is lower than it, it feels that distance from its source. And therefore, it has a yearning to return to its source. It wants to be in its original state. So therefore, when it comes down, it feels, I want to go back. But then when it returns, it also feels that its source wants it to descend. That's the purpose for its existence in the first place. So therefore, it's in this constant mode of going down to give life to its environment, and then feeling that it wants to return, and then again feeling that it needs to go back, and on and on and on. In addition to that, it also feels that when it comes down into its environment, particularly when we talk about a neshama in a guf, and likewise when we speak about oiris and kelim, a soul and a body, and likewise the divine lights, the celestial lights, when they come down into the celestial vessels, in other words, the spheres, the attributes, the oir, the light, feels, or the neshama, when we talk about that in the context of the soul and the body, feels that the body, the vessel, does not possess this mode of Rotzu V'Shoiv, of leaving and returning, because of the fact that the body and also the divine vessel, they do not feel their source consciously. So therefore, the light that comes to illuminate them, to give life to them, feels, what am I doing here? It's not a friendly environment. So again, it causes the to decide that it wants to leave and wants to return to its source. And then again, it feels that its source says to it, you need to go back. So that's the reasons for Rotzu V'Shoiv. They have added one point, that by the light coming into the vessel, the oil coming into the kli, and similarly with the neshama coming down into the body, the descent into the lower levels causes the lower levels also. It ignites this idea of rotzu, of the wanting to leave and wanting to cleave to its source, also in the lower levels. But that's the phenomenon of Rotzu V'Shoiv, is because of these 2 points, because of the fact that it feels its source and cleaves to its source, and also because it feels that the environment in which it operates is not a naturally friendly environment. Now we go back to Parah Aduma. What does it got to do with Parah Aduma? That's chapter 4.
You would have thought if it went into the source, which was unfriendly, it would stay there.
Not the source. The environment in which it operates.
The kalim.
Yes.
Because that's where the work is being done, to convert the kalim.
Well, that's where the source is sending it to. That's the purpose of the oil existing in the first place.
To change the kalim.
Well, to operate... Yes, to operate in the environment, to operate in an environment which is outside of it, which is lower than it. So that's the whole purpose of its existence. So when it comes back to its source, the oil feels, okay, I've got to go back because that's the purpose of my existence. That's why I'm here.
To change the kelim.
To unite with the kelim and to operate with the kelim.
To make it more the kelim more sensitive to the source.
Yes, and ultimately to create an entity, as it were, of Elam Hazeh, of this physical world, which we transform through Torah and mitzvahs.
So when
and raise to a higher level.
It comes to the kelim and it's not a friendly environment, it goes back to the source.
Correct.
And on the other hand, you're saying when it comes to the kelim, its job is to convert the kelim.
Correct. Well, part of what it does is it's a dual. The influence is what's the word? Interactive. In other words, each one influences the other. It's not just that the keli makes it feel that it's unfriendly. The keli also feels. It's not just that the oir feels that the keli is an unfriendly environment. The keli also feels, hey, I've got somebody's present. Something is present here that has this tremendous rotzu, and therefore, what's with me, kind of thing. So they affect each other, and it's that tension, that process of the tension, that gives us the whole picture. So now, what does that have to do with Parah Aduma? Ubazeyu in chapter 4, page 52, towards the bottom of the page. With this, we will also understand this concept of Parah Aduma being the statute of the Torah. Right? Why is this considered a statute of the Torah, meaning to say, of the entire Torah? There seems to be something in Parah Aduma which relates to the entire Torah, as opposed to any other mitzvah. The chukah hu lashon hanhaga. Chukah means a statute, but chukah is also from the expression of governing, like the governing law. Kemoi, as it says in the pasuk in Yirmiyahu, chukos shamayim va'aretz. Hashem says, Im loy brisi yomim v'layla, if not for my covenant day and night, chukos hashamayim v'ha'aretz leisamti. I would not have installed the laws of the heavens and the earth, meaning to say, the governing laws of the world would not exist if not for the giving of the Torah. What's the point? The point is that chukah is from the expression of leading, of running things, meaning to say that you're talking about something central. So when we say Zos Chukas Hatorah, this is the chukah of the Torah in the context of chukah meaning hanhaga, running, governing, right? It means that the governing of the Torah is b'bchinas Ratzav Hashov. This is what governs the Torah. The entire Torah is in this mode of Ratzav Hashov. Ukmoisha Kasuv. Where do we find Ratzav Hashov in Torah? First, we need to establish that there is Ratzav Hashov in Torah, and then when we put that into the context of Zos Chukas Hatorah, we will see that this Ratzav Hashov is actually the central theme of the entire Torah mitzvahs.
So how do you make the jump from the Chukas and Haga to Ratzav Hashov?
Oh, so we don't know. The Rebbe is now going to explain how we find Ratzav Hashov in Torah and mitzvahs. Ukmeisha Kasuv. Now let's see where we find Ratzav Hashov in Torah. Ukmeisha Kasuv, as it says in the pasuk, in the parasha of V'zeis Bracha, Mi minoi eish das lamai. From his right hand, a fiery law comes forth to them. So what is he referring to? He's referring to the Torah, and he's referring it as coming from his right hand. And what comes from his right hand? A fiery law. What are these two concepts of right and fire? The right side and fire. The yamin, the right side, signifies the idea of hamshacha, drawing down, giving, right? Bechinas shov, which is the idea of returning. The right hand is chesed, right? Chesed is the idea of giving, going down to the other. So that's the idea of shov, of returning. The eish dos, when we talk about fire, a fiery law, fire is hu bechinas halah. That is the mode of rising up. Just like fire, whose nature is to go upwards. The height of Chinas Rotzu. which is the concept of rotza, of leaving. So in Torah we find that it's referred to in these two opposing modes. On the one hand, it is mimina, it's given from his right hand, which is the idea of chesed, which is the idea of giving, of hamshacha, of being drawn down. That's shuv. And then it's also referred to the same pasuk as what? Eish dos, a fiery law, which is the idea of rising up, rotzu. So, since there are these two modes in Torah, this also it comes down into the actual doing of the mitzvahs. The Gadol Talmud, the Talmud, the Gemara says that the greatness of learning is, the greatness of the Torah is, maybe that it brings the Maisa to action, to mitzvahs. So in other words, what you find in Torah, you will also find in what? In the mitzvahs of the Torah. So therefore we see that also mitzvahs are in this mode of leaving and returning. Where do we find that? The mitzvahs are broken down into two parts, two types of mitzvahs. The active mitzvahs, the positive mitzvahs, the active mitzvahs that we do. And then there are mitzvahs that we perform by what? By not doing, by refraining from doing certain actions. The mitzvahs of doing, that we do, which are performed in a way of getting up and doing. That's the idea of returning, of being drawn down. Hamshacha. Or mitzvahs leisas, the mitzvahs that we perform by refraining from doing certain actions. What is the idea of these mitzvahs? Their idea is to sit and not to do, in other words, to perform them by a non-activity. That's the idea of what? Of rotzu, of leaving. So we find rotzu v'shoiv in Torah, and we find the rotzu v'shoiv in mitzvahs. What? Now let's superimpose that on what? On Parah Aduma. V'cheinu gam beParah Aduma, page Gimel at the top. V'cheinu gam beParah Aduma. So too we find in the mitzvah of the red heifer, she'inyano rotzu v'shoiv, that the red heifer, the idea of the red heifer, we find this idea of leaving and returning. Sorry, what?
I just find it very strange that Rotzu should be the side of Losas.
Again, it has to do with your environment. In this context, he's talking about shuv, meaning you're returning to operate within an environment. Yeah. So when you're interacting, when you're doing mitzvahs, you're interacting with your environment, you're interacting with certain objects, you're expressing yourself within your environment. That's the shuv.
Shuv is when you come back to yourself.
No. In this context, it means you've come back to your environment. You're present in your environment.
It's your environment, okay, yeah?
Ma'isa ha-mitzvahs, action, right. The world of action. Rotzu means you're returning back into yourself. You're refraining, you're withholding from interacting with your environment.
Are you making a difference between returning to Hashem?
Yes, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
we're talking about two different things.
Correct. Over here we're talking about where is Rotzu v'shoiv in mitzvahs. In this context, the source, so to speak, is the person, and the environment in which it operates is obviously the person's sphere of influence. The person's the place where he operates, right? For the highest, right? So in this context, Rotzu is being within yourself, in your state of inactivity, where you're not interacting. And Shuv means returning, much like the Eir. When you say that the Eir, what's the purpose of the Eir? The purpose of the Eir is to go ahead and to what? And to operate in its environment, to operate in the Kelim. Similarly, when the person is active in his environment, that's the concept of Shuv. And when the person is within a state of resting, so to speak, within a state of being within himself, that's Rotzu. That's his energy coming back to its source.
But that's the opposite way around, because Rotz means to go out of yourself. And Shuv means to return. Rotzu
means to go. It doesn't mean to go necessarily out of yourself. It means to go out of. It could also mean to go out of your environment.
To go and do the mitzvahs. Rotzu.
No, it's not.
No, Rotzu is to do the mitzvahs and to do the leisas of mitzvahs in action, not to operate in your environment. Like the Eir that leaves its environment, its keli, and goes back to its source. In this context, it's the action of the person, the activity of the person, going back to its source, which is what? The person himself. So Rotzu is not doing, inactivity, so that's the mitzvah leisasa. And the mitzvah saseh is the shuv, going back and operating in its environment.
Going back in.
Operating in its environment, returning to where it was sent down to. So, where do we find that in Parah Aduma? We find also in connection to the red heifer this idea of leaving and returning. Why? The water of purification, the purifying waters that we use to purify the person who requires that process, is made up of what? Efer, which is ashes, umayim chayim, and living water. What is the difference between the two? The efer, the ashes, shenasa, this efer sapora, which comes about how? How is this ash produced? That is produced through burning the red heifer. Hu inyan ratzu. That's the idea of what? Ratzu, leaving. Why? Fire. Like we said before, fire rises up, wants to leave. Umayim chayim, and the living waters, and b'chinas shuv. The living waters are in the mode of returning. They signify the returning. Shaharei mayim yerdim mimakim gavei lamakim namuch. Because it is the nature of water to descend from a high place to a low place. Meaning what? Shuv, returning. So if that's the case, now we come to a question. So the bottom line is, we find this idea of Parah Aduma we find this idea of Ratzav Hashev in Parah Aduma, the leaving and returning in connection to the red heifer. But the Rebbe just finished saying that the entire Torah is in a mode of Ratzav Hashev, in the entire Torah and mitzvahs. We find these two modes of leaving and returning, and that is what? In mitzvahs. That is represented in the mitzvahs Aseh, Shuv, and the mitzvahs Leisa Asa, which is Ratzu. So why Parah Aduma? Why is Parah Aduma called Chukas Hatorah, the statute of the entire Torah? The reason why specifically the mitzvah of the red heifer is called with this general name of being the law of the entire Torah, because there is a qualitative advantage in the Ratzav Hashev, the leaving and returning as it's represented in the mitzvah of the red heifer, over the leaving and returning as it is represented in all the other mitzvahs. Where's the difference? In all the other mitzvahs, it's in an individualized manner, meaning there are certain mitzvahs that are in the category of what? Of rotzu, leaving, which are what? Generally, all the mitzvahs leisas, all the mitzvahs that we perform by inactivity. Which are the mitzvahs that are in the mode of sheva, of returning? Generally, these are all the mitzvahs that are in the bracket of being active mitzvahs that we perform through an action. Masha'enkin Parah Aduma. Not so when we speak about the mitzvah of Parah Aduma, the red heifer. He mitzvah achas klolis. It's one general mitzvah that possesses these two modalities, these two aspects of leaving and returning, all wrapped up in one mitzvah. So Parah Aduma has in it an element of all the mitzvahs asay, and an element of all the mitzvahs leisasa. Therefore, Parah Aduma is considered Chukas Hatorah of all the mitzvahs of the entire Torah.
Is there anything else? Nothing else that has those aspects in. Davening with you, better.
Davening is also. Not only that, okay, the Rebbe is going to spell it out. Now the Rebbe is going to spell it out even further, break it down even further. Omnom, however, Adayin in the movement is still not understood. Mashamatzina b'Moshe b'Shleima shesigu taimei kol sha'ar mitzvahs v'rak b'mitzvahs aduma. I'm sorry. Again, Omnom, however, Adayin in the movement is still not understood. Mashamatzina b'Moshe b'Shleima, that which we find concerning Moshe and Shleima and Solomon, shesigu taimei kol sha'ar mitzvahs, that they grasp the reasons for all the other mitzvahs. V'rak b'mitzvahs Parah Aduma. But only concerning the mitzvah of the red heifer. What happened there? To Moshe, to Moses, God said, "To you I will reveal the reason for the red heifer." Ushleima Amar, and Solomon said, "Amarti achakma," I said, I will become wise, meaning to say I will even grasp the reason for Parah Aduma. Mimeni, however, it's remained distant and elusive from me. The lechura. It would seem that there's a problem here. Why? The Rebbe just finished explaining in the most beautiful way that Para Aduma has what? Elements of all the mitzvahs in it. It has the element of the mitzvahs leisasa and the element of the mitzvahs asay. So in other words, it seems that the only difference between Para Aduma and all the other mitzvahs is that all the other mitzvahs are either in a Rotzu mode, leisasa, inactivity, or in a Shuv mode, mitzvahs asay, an active way. If that's the case, so here you're saying to me, there's one mitzvah that possesses both. Okay, so why is it so distant? Why is it such a problem to grasp the reason for Para Aduma? The Lechura, seemingly, in Mailas Para Aduma Irak Mailas Aklal Ala Prat, if the advantage of Para Aduma, the reason why Para Aduma is different than all the other mitzvahs, is only because of the fact that it's like something general relative to the details. All the other mitzvahs have aspects of Para Aduma in it, and Para Aduma incorporates within it the aspects of all mitzvahs. Therefore, it would seem that when Shlomo HaMelech grasped all the mitzvahs, the Hainu, in other words, what does it mean he grasped all the mitzvahs? Haprotim, the details, why doesn't it follow from there that he should automatically be able to grasp the general rule, the generality of all the mitzvahs? If he has perceived the details, why can't he perceive and grasp the sum of the details? It seems to, what you seem to be saying is that Para Aduma is the sum of the details. So once he grasps the details, he should also be able to grasp the sum. Because there's a rule, as the Gemara says in Becheres, that the klal, the general rule, possesses that. In other words, it is the sum of the details. So Shlomo HaMelech should have perceived Para Aduma if it's merely the sum of the sum total of the details. Similarly, it's also not understood that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. God said to Moses, to you I'm revealing the reason for Para Aduma, for the red heifer, but not to anybody else. Again, we have this problem. Since there are others that do grasp the details, in other words, what is the Eibishter saying? That Para Aduma is in a bracket of itself. All the other mitzvahs, there are others that can have a grasp and understanding of the other mitzvahs. Para Aduma is unique. Same problem, same question that we have concerning Shlomo HaMelech. If others are able to perceive the details, in other words, have a perception and have a grasp in the mitzvah of Para Aduma, in all the other mitzvahs, therefore, what is the greatness of the fact? Why is it so unique? When that to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, God revealed the general, the generality of all the mitzvahs in the sense of Para Aduma. Simply put, the question is, what we seem to be saying is that Para Aduma encapsulates within it elements of all the mitzvahs. So therefore, if I'm able to grasp each individual mitzvah, if I'm able to understand the reasons for each individual mitzvah, if I'm able to understand what each individual mitzvah represents, as we just said, Rotzu v'Sheiv, some of them in the bracket of Rotzu, some of them in the bracket of Sheiv, some of them in the bracket of leaving, some of them in the bracket of returning, Esa and Leisesa, or Leisesa and Esa, in this order. So then, Para Aduma represents both. Okay, beautiful. Why is it so difficult? And why is it so beyond the person that Shlomo HaMelech, although he tried, it remained elusive, and Moshe Rabbeinu merited this great level of knowing about Para Aduma as well. Therefore, since we have these two strong questions, the point is not the question. The point is that obviously there is something that Para Aduma possesses which is over and above all the other mitzvahs, not just being the sum of the details. Therefore, we are compelled to say, says the Rebbe, that the leaving and returning, as it is represented in the mitzvah of the red heifer, it's in a qualitative, greater way than in all the other mitzvahs. It's not just merely that in all the other mitzvahs you have some that are in the bracket of rotzu, leaving, mitzvahs leisasa, the mitzvahs that we perform through inactivity, and we have shuv, mitzvahs asay, the mitzvahs that we perform in a mode of action, and Para Aduma possesses both. It's not only that it possesses both at once, as represented, as mentioned before, in the ashes and the water together, but rather there is a substantively different type of Rotz of Shuv, leaving and returning in Parah Aduma, as opposed to the Rotz of Shuv as the leaving and returning as it is represented in all the mitzvahs. And to find out what that is, you'll have to come back to the next year.